Welcome to video 1 of 3 for section 8.1 in IM1. There is 3 boxes to talk about, and there's a ton of vocab words. So I suggest you just follow along with the blank notes to get this done the fastest way, okay? So first things first, let's go ahead and talk about these terms that are undefined. There's a couple of them: points, lines, and planes. So a point has no dimensions, it's just a dot, and it represents a point. So for example, I could just draw a dot and call this B and call that point B, or I could label it as point B. But really, we're just drawing dots. So any kind of dot is going to represent a point. Let's talk about lines real quick here. A line has one dimension. It is represented by a line with 2 arrows, and it extends without end. And through any 2 points, there's exactly one line. You can use any 2 points on the line to name it. So for example, if I were to draw this little line here and put 2 arrows on the end of it and call this line M, for example, that's one way that I could represent line M. The other way is if I have 2 points that are on that line, let's call them P and Q, for example. We could label this as line PQ with arrow bars over it, sorry. Or we could say this is line QP, again, with arrow bars on top of it. So there's a couple of ways you could represent a line, okay? Lastly, or second to last, rather, a plane has 2 dimensions. It's represented by a shape that kind of looks like a floor or a wall, but it continues without end. And you need 3 points that are not in the same line to be in exactly one plane. You can use 3 points that are not all in the same line to name that plane. So for example, if I were to draw a plane over here on the right-hand side in blue for you, I could call this plane R if I wanted to. Or if there are 3 points that are inside that plane that are not in the same line. So for example, let's call this C, P, and D, for example. I could say this is plane R or plane CDP or plane DPC. As long as they are not in the same line, then we can talk about them being in the same plane. So lastly, this leads us to these last 2 words, collinear and coplanar. So collinear points are points that lie in the same line. Okay, so collinear points are points that lie in the same line. So for example, if I have these 2 points and I draw a line through them, they are collinear because they lie on the same line. Similarly, coplanar points are points that lie in the same plane. So if I have a plane and I have 3 points and they're all in the same plane, then they're called coplanar. So these are all the words and the definitions that we're going to be using for the next section, so it's really important that we got all these down. All right, box 2 is asking us to use the diagram on the right-hand side over there. And for part A, we want to give 2 other names for line PQ and for plane R. So let's take a look at A first. So 2 other names for line PQ. Well, where is line PQ? Let's take a look at that. That's this one here in blue for you. So notice that there's an N attached to it. So I could say that this is line N. That will also work. And I could also name these in reverse order. So I could say this is line QP. So that's the other way to name these. Okay, 2 other names for plane R. So if I look at plane R, I need 3 points in the same plane. So this is plane R. So this is a point T, point V, and it looks like maybe point S. So another name for plane R could be TVS. That would work. There are many answers that will work for this thing. Or I could name, how about like PT, and V. That will also work, PT and V. So as long as they're not in the same line, then we can talk about planes that way, okay? So that's 2 other names for plane R. Part B is saying, name 3 points that are collinear. So we have to find 3 points in this picture that are all in the same line. So definitely T, P, and S. These are all on line M, so they are collinear. So T, P, and S. Those are 3 points that are collinear. And then 4 points that are coplanar. That means that they have to be in the same plane as plane R. So that looks like T, P, S, and V. So everything except for point Q. So we can say T, P, S, and V. So these points here, right? So T, P, S, and then V. All of those are basically, think of those as like marbles on the table, right? They're all on the table. So they're all coplanar. Okay, that's everything for box number 2. Okay, last example here. We have a diagram, and we can see that we have plane S, kind of like the vertical plane up here, right? This is plane S. And then we have, looks like plane T, which is down here, like maybe in red for you, right? And that's also maybe like a horizontal. So it just says name any 4 points. Okay, that's pretty easy to do. So maybe D is a point, right? E is a point. C is a point, and B is a point. So that's just naming 4 points, not a big deal. Now it says name 2 lines. Well, let's see, I'll do this like in purple for you. We can talk about this line here, and that would be line BC. And I have to label it correctly with the arrow notation above it. That's a line. And then I also have another line here. Maybe I'll do an orange, right? This line over here. So I would call that maybe line DE, right? And again, I would use the correct notation above it with the arrow bars. Name the plane that contains points A, B, and C. So let me get rid of all this stuff for you here, right? So here's point A, here's point B, and here's point C. All of those points are contained in plane S. So that is going to be plane S. So it says name the plane that contains those points. All right. And then lastly, it says name the plane that contains points A, D, and E. And I'll do this one for you in like hot pink. So A is over here, D is over here, and E is over here. So all of the points are in plane T. So that's going to be plane T for that one. Remember, we need 3 points that are non-collinear to name a plane. So A, D, and E are non-collinear, and they fall in plane T. All right, there you go. That's everything for the first video.